Okay, let's take one more basic PHP example and show the code, and maybe just do a little bit of variation on some areas of it. So on this one, we have a future value calculator. Remember that file, the index.php, no matter how deep I have it, all of this has to be inside the htdocs. So on here, it still has a validation. So if I calculate and I haven't entered any information, it'll bring up a error and tell me I've got to enter it again. So let's say that I want to know how much my $5,000 is that I put in now. If I have a yearly interest rate of 7%, and let's say in 18 years, whenever my child that was born is going to start college. So here I can see that it's going to be $16,000. Doesn't seem like much, but we probably would not stick with just 5,000. That could be 5,000 a year maybe. Okay, so let's see how this works. Now we start off with our index PHP. Okay. Now this one we want our PHP to start before we even hit our HTML. So on this one, we go through, and again, we're starting our PHP because we want to check to see what our variables should be set at, either the first time and the rest of the time that we bring up this page. So if I've already been through it once, I check through it and it says if my variable is set, that I've got the not in front of it. So if I have not set this piece of information, then I'm going to blank it out. And the same on the rest of it. So if my investment has not been set, there's nothing in it. Okay, so that's my PHP for setting it. Now I can start in on my HTML because this is what's going to display. So I have my basic doc type HTML, which is now our standard HTML5 reference. And we have all of our links, anything. Notice we haven't got anything linked to HTML5 here. We would need to include that if we wanted it. But as we're going through here, we have our main, our H1. Now, at some point in time, I might want to check to see if there is any error messages that need to be displayed. If there's not, then I continue on. But if my error message that I've created for error messages is not empty, okay, so there's something that I have placed in it, then notice here I'm having to close the PHP and open when I want to integrate it in, because the minute I hit my PHP, here's my paragraph with a style applied, starting PHP, I'm echoing my error message. And of course, I'm using one of the functions from HTML, my HTML special chars, which means if I have any symbols that could be interpreted as HTML, I want it converted to the symbol number. So if I had a greater than symbol that was embedded in the error message, it would translate it to the ASCII symbol or the word that would generate greater than. So it would actually print the symbol instead of trying to interpret as HTML. Close PHP. Open and close just because of that paragraph. And now I'm doing my form. Now notice every single time I need to set a value of any of my inputs because I have a variable that has been calculated or entered. So I want this to show up, and I'm going to translate any characters since the investment might have some special characters. I'm translating it. I do that for every single element or entity that I have in my form. Now the minute I click on submit, it's going to go up and say find the display results in PHP and execute that. And it is a post method. And that's important because that is how we get the information from this form, a post or a get. So when I go to my display results, I want to make sure that I'm either doing an input post or an input get. So I get all the information from the form and put it in my variables. Now I have changed one thing here. Before we were just doing an input post and in brackets the name of our entity. But here I want to send what we have through the filter input function. So it's going to take the name, investment, go to the form and find that element, grab the data, and I'm going to validate it as a float. There's some I might validate as an int. It will return false if it does not validate. So if this doesn't validate correctly, investment will have the word false in it. It's like a bullet turned to a boolean. There's other validators that you can look up. There's like an email, there's a phone, telephone, there's different types of validation we can do. All right, now once I get back through here, I'm going to validate some more. So if my validation did not work from my filter, it knows it's not a valid number. If it did make it through it, then I'm going to validate for a range, and I'm going to validate all the rest of them also. So this, remember, I checked the error message before to make sure that it wasn't empty before I went through and did my calculations. So once we get through all our validation, okay, I want to make sure that if everything validated, then my else statement will kick in and I'll make sure my error message is nothing. Just a precaution. Now as I go on, I'm displaying the same form that I did originally. I'm not doing a brand new one here. So if my error message is not equal to setting here, then I want to include my index PHP. And remember what your include does. It brings the code and inserts it in. So it's going to go through and pick this up and run the whole thing all over again. That's why I had this at the top. That's why I'm using in my form the value. And when it gets done, it will exit. So if I have bad validation, meaning there is something in my error message, it must run the form again. Now if there's nothing in it, it'll go through and do its calculations, and we have to do a for loop for the number of years we're investing. And again, we're going out and build our display string. And again, PHP can save a format. So I'm putting the $sign joined with the investment that's formatted to 2 decimal places. The interest rate is just joined with the flat % symbol. And when I'm ready to display this information, because I'm not going back to the form, I go back, I close my PHP and go back into my doc types, back into HTML. Now notice on this display, it was not a form, it was just a label. And I want to make sure that I PHP echo out the formatted variable, not the variable that doesn't have the format. And I produce my report. When it gets completely done, it sits there and waits it's done. I could put a link down here that said go back to the index if I wanted to run another one. But this is just a simple one. I hope this has helped, and now next time we'll be ready for some more advanced topics. I'll attach the files to it to make sure that you can have that code to follow along, and you might even want to look at it ahead of time before the video just to familiarize yourself with it. Continue on. Good luck.